Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 9 of Cameron's Nostalgia Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Strickling, and today I have with me Brian Lynas. How are you, Brian?
I'm well. How are you, Cameron?
I'm doing good. Now, for any of the guys who don't know, Brian is the animator who worked on Farkleberry Farm, Baby Faith, and Baby Signs, and he is one of the animators for Bazillion Pictures. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cameron. Thanks for having me on. Uh, a former worker at Bazillion Pictures, the company no longer exists. And I don't know that I worked on anything called Baby Faith. But other than that, I think what you said is correct.
Nice. All right. Starting off with our first question. So, how did you get interested in animation?
When I was about 8 years old, my brothers introduced me to flip books, and I was pretty amazed that you could make it look like something was moving, uh, you know, in a book, on the margins of a book. It's just stick figures, but they had them like playing basketball and spinning into and turning into tornadoes, and it looked really fun. So I asked them how to do it, and they showed me, and then the rest is history. Also, I should say, growing up as a kid, I liked cartoons. I think most kids do. And so, uh, seeing the flip books, and seeing the cartoons, basically, I put two and two together. It's like, oh, so that's how those are made, and figured, found out, people got paid to make those cartoons. And so I was like, well, I guess I would like to do that. So I started studying so that I could.
And what cartoons do you watch as a kid?
Well, they had Saturday morning cartoons were a big thing back then. Uh, Back in the early 80s, they introduced He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and uh, so I'd watch that, and then a little bit later came Transformers, and well, there's Voltron and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Um, Kind of watched a little bit of GI Joe, but I wasn't as really into that into that as the other stuff. Saturday morning, Smurfs, you know, uh, yeah, whatever they had on, Super Friends. Uh, really did every once in a while we would get a Disney feature film like and watch it on a VCR, and I could tell that the quality of their animation was, uh, you know, definitely a bar higher. They set the bar high, and so I usually, yeah, I often aspired to do quality animation like Disney.
Okay. So, what was your first animation debut?
Well, when I was in college, I made a short film, a student film. It took me 3 semesters to make it, uh, because I was learning the software, and it was pretty ambitious. I wanted it to be 10 minutes originally, a 10-minute animation. I think it turned out to be like 7 minutes or so, and that includes like a minute and a half worth of credits. So But it still took me 3 semesters to make it, and there's only like two characters in it. It's Anthony Ant's Return. Uh, so the first semester I didn't finish it, and I got a C in the class. And the second semester I got a B because I was a little bit closer to being done. And then when I finally finished it, I got an A. Uh, but it was broadcast on Kansas City local news station, KCTV 5. It's part of a compilation of student films. So when it was broadcast, I guess that you could consider that my debut. Um, that was the first thing I ever made it onto the TV. And then a couple of years later is when I started working at Bazillion Pictures. And while I worked there, we made commercials that would fairly regularly make it to television.
I did show you some of the shots that you animate for baby signs.
Yeah, that's Suki is the character's name. They wanted her and all the characters to move fairly slow. The idea was that babies, this would be made for babies, and so they wanted to be the babies to be able to follow what was going on the screen, and so everything. The direction was to animate everything, fairly slow, to make it very, very slow, and every action really deliberate. Part of that too is, whenever this is animation to make babies, to teach babies sign language, and so in those couple of examples, you see a couple of characters making a sign, and when they make the sign, they want the to be very readable, especially to young children, and so they're all very slow, and as a novice animator, when I first started, I think I found in general my animation tended to be a little bit slow naturally. It seems like the further I got along, I got a much better sense of timing um, and uh, how quick things can move. But even still, those animations were intentionally pushed to be slower and directed to be slower.
You did the drink sign.
Yes, I did that. Yeah, and I think I have links to some of these uh, on my webpage, linusanimation.com, and that is spelled Lynas, linusanimation.com. It has some stuff from baby signs and price chompers, a transforming robot kind of excavator character, a lot of other stuff on there. You can see a lot of the character animation I've done through the years, but the people at Baby Signs that our client that we did those for, they uh, a few years back they posted the full quality, animations um, on their on YouTube, and so I just found the links to those and put them on my webpage. So you can basically link to them from my webpage.
You did the Morse sign.
I believe so. There were a few animators work, including myself. I was one of the main animators, but there were other people that animated some of the other shots, and so usually I can tell. Usually I can remember which ones that I did, but every once in a while, we did these about 20 years ago, and so I'm not always 100% sure which ones I worked on, but pretty sure I did I know that I'm pretty sure I did the Suki one, and I'm not 100% sure if I did the Moore one or if that was my colleague, that was his work.
All right. So, what was it like working on Baby Signs?
Well, um, trying to think is like it was one of the first projects that we did after Farkleberry Farm, which is if anybody's seen Farkleberry Farm, that's full of oh, not your regular human characters. That's bulldozers and pigs and horses and cows and you know, none of them really. Even the one character that was kind of more humanoid was actually the pig's mom. She stood up on 2 feet and uh, she had hands, you could say, but uh, you never saw her hands. She was wearing mittens the whole times, the whole time, and so uh, I believe it's very possible that the Baby Signs characters were some of the first ones that I animated that actually had fingers, um, and so um, that and they're supposedly human, bipedal, characters, and so it was a nice kind of foray into animating more humanoid characters, uh, still very cartoony, but not quite so. And they're supposed to perform, um, uh, you know, uh, sign language. Uh, and so, uh, is I guess a nice little segue into developing my skills as an animator. Um, we worked on it for a couple of years, I believe. 2.5 years maybe. We were developing animations for the Baby Signs, our clients over there that were producing that. Um, uh, it was a nice pace. It was a good load of work, and it kept me busy for 2.5 years, I believe. So it was almost like an era, you could say, of the handful of eras that there were when I worked at Bazillion Pictures. Um, it was good. Kind of, you know, got my got a lot of practice in animating those characters.
All right. So, what was it like working on your first short film called Anthony Ant's Return?
Well, it was back in I want to say I started working on it in maybe 1997. Back then, there were a handful of 3D software, uh, but uh, the one that we had available where I went to school was called Infinity. Um, and oh, uh, like I said, I was kind of learning the software at the same time as trying to create my short film. And so, uh, you know, uh, before Anthony Ant, one of the first things I animated was a table. It was just like four legs and a tabletop. Uh, and I think I made a little lamp that hung above it and a real basic box for a room. And I learned, like, how to basically set a camera, maybe put a light in the scene. And the animation that the table did was nothing special. It was just basically standing there, and then a couple of the legs pop out from under it and it falls down. Um, with Anthony Ant, the he was the first character you could say I made, and so um, one of the things I learned was you could link the different parts together. So you would have a hand that can move by itself, and you would have a forearm that would move by itself. But if you link the hand to the forearm, when the forearm moved, the hand would move. And so I learned, with that character, basically how to link all the different body parts together. Um, Having elastic skin, you could say, on characters was not impossible in those times, but I just didn't know how to do it. And so um, that's part of the reason that I decided to make a character out of an ant, is because, he has an exoskeleton where you can just rigidly link everything together and make kind of make a character. So it like I said, it took me 3 semesters to animate. It was fun because I was learning, and and not only learning the technical aspects of the software, but also learning the craft and the creativity behind animation and the idea of making a character, believable, make them seem like they're alive, um, and so it was pretty fun. Uh, one of the things I one of the techniques I used for Anthony Ant was his eyes were just basically spheres, uh, and to make him blink, I basically painted the eyelid in a few different poses, and I would swap out the texture that was on his eyelids to make it look like uh, he was blinking or moving his eyelids. His pupils, however, were very small spheres that sat on the surface. And so when I first made his eyes blink, his eyelids closed, but his pupil was still floating on the surface, and it looked unnatural. And so I basically had to animate the pupil hiding inside of the sphere of the eyeball at the same time, as coordinated with every blink that he did. And so uh whatever works, was the philosophy. Because like I say, I was learning nowadays, uh they have real eyelids, or physical or dimensional eyelids that actually cover, and the pupils are different. But it was a learning experience. It was fun. Basically the short answer.
All right. After Infinity Ant's return, you got to work on Farkleberry Farm.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was it like working on Farkleberry Farm?
Well, that one had more than just a couple of characters in it, for sure. That one, I didn't come up with the story or um, and another big thing was the characters they actually talked in Anthony Ant, whereas in Anthony Ant they did not. They were just basically mute. But uh, there were voice actors, and so we would get voice recordings and um, uh, so and the voice actors they gave you know actual performances like actors would, and so you kind of had more material to work from and in order to make the characters believable. And when you have a character and their lips are moving to the words it and they're emoting various expressions and stuff, it adds another layer, a lot of dimension to that believability of the character. And I was also another big aspect of that production was it wasn't just me, it was I had two bosses and one coworker to start with, but by the time we were done with Farkleberry Farm, there was probably more like uh, three or four, three or the two bosses, myself, and then maybe three other employees, three or four possibly. It took us maybe a couple of years, I think, to make. Originally, we were thinking uh, back in the early 2000s, YouTube was not very big at all, but I think one of the ideas was to make webisodes, is what they were calling them, which would be like short 2 or 3 minute segments uh, that they would basically we would animate and then release a webisode once every few weeks or a month or so. And but that I think they decided fairly early on that the better market would be to try to release it to make a short film and and release it to VHS. So uh, it was about 40 minutes, roughly 10 characters, maybe 10 to 15 characters in the in the film, and uh, they even had musical numbers, a couple or a few musical numbers in there, and you know, uh, it was definitely a bigger production. Uh, it was the biggest production I had worked on at the time. Of course, we were just a small studio with like five or six people or working on it. But if you included all the voice actors, the writers, and the musicians, and I don't know how many investors there were, but if you added everyone together, it's a small little crew that put that together. And uh, so it was fun to be able, to actually create something. um, Part of the production with that too was we would go and make uh, a float for the St. Patrick's Day parade to try to promote the movie. And so we did stuff like that, and there was also a van that they had the couple of the main characters printed on with the Farkleberry Farm logo, so that they could kind of drive that van around and promote the promote the VHS. I don't think it ever made any money, but at the same time, uh, I think it got a lot of exposure for the company, you know. So that was one of the first projects we worked on, at that company. And I was still working there 15 or 16 years later, uh, even after after working on Farkleberry Farm. So it was a good kind of springboard project, kind of make a name for the company.
Nice. So, do you have any behind the scenes stuff?
Do I have any behind the scenes stuff from Farkleberry or just in general? I could maybe dig through some old files. I probably wouldn't be able to find anything satisfying right now as we speak. I honestly don't know if I have any of the, I'm pretty sure I don't have any of the native uh, 3D software files of it. I might have an extra video clip of, you know, something hidden away somewhere. But yeah, the when the company closed down, uh, I basically tried to get some stuff for my demo reel, uh, and I only had like maybe a couple of hours to kind of do it, and so um, I don't know if I was able to I'm sure some stuff slipped through the cracks, and even if it was still available on the server, um, well, I don't even know if anything was available on the server at the time, uh, because after so many years, some of the older stuff gets archived away. And so, you know, me personally, I might not have anything from that era. Um, I'm not sure if either of my former bosses would still have anything like that or not. But it'd be pretty, I know there were a few things that were kind of like behind the scenes or under the hood type of things.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Hmm. So, what was it like working on Beach Bums Island?
Well, that one was a little bit furthermore, in terms of developing my animation skills, the characters moved faster. Uh, they did more cartoony kind of action-packed kind of moves. The main character, there's a scene where he's like surfing on a wave, and they end up getting mixed up, and somehow a water vortex gets formed, like they spin into a tornado, and coconuts are falling out of trees, sandcastles are being built and collapsing, and it's a little bit more cartoony. So um, this was a handful of years after we had worked on baby signs. And so, it was like a good another good stepping stone in terms of developing animation wise, in terms of, animation skills. Um, Beach Bums was for a restaurant that was going to they were a pizza restaurant, and the idea was to produce these animations so that uh, they would play the animations while people were enjoying their food, and the whole restaurant was themed after the beach bums, and so it's very Caribbean, tropical kind of uh, you know uh, uh, environment. They painted palm trees on the walls, and actually I think they had some like fake palm trees, but they had a great big aquarium in the waiting room, and Or I take that back. It wasn't an actual aquarium. They had us make an animation of an aquarium. It was full of cartoon characters. I didn't get to work on that part so much, but I got to do a lot of the animations for the episodes we made for the inside of the restaurant. And so uh, they had a great big old screen there. I can't remember quite how big, but it was almost the size of a wall, an entire wall, where uh, we did at the time it was HD resolution, not full 1080p resolution, but 720 by 1280. Um, this was in the late 2000s, and so that was still considered, a higher resolution. And it was also widescreen, as opposed to, when we did Farkleberry Farm and Baby Signs, those were like more of the 3:4 aspect ratio is more square. And so it was kind of neat to work on the 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 more widescreen because it had a more cinematic feel to it. And um oh, it just seemed a little bit more epic, just a little bit, you know. Uh the other thing we did too was with that one was we changed it wasn't, since it wasn't for broadcast television, we weren't doing it for a television spot commercial or anything like that, is we could change the frame rate to more like what they do in films, which is 24 frames per second. And there's a little bit of a different aesthetic when you watch something at 24 frames per second as opposed to 30. It looks more like a film. It feels more like a film, you know. So it was pretty nice to kind of work on that scale. I know nowadays that's not, you know, nearly as big of a scale as, the 4K resolution, or even I guess they have some stuff that's 8K, which is crazy. Um, or whatever Christopher Nolan did with Oppenheimer, the IMAX, but um, still back in those times it was fun to kind of step it up a notch. Um, I know on one of the episodes we had gotten pretty far along in the production on it, and they were still working on the story, and they couldn't quite get these. I think they previewed the progress to some clients at some point, and they decided that the story wasn't entertaining enough, and so they sent it off and had rewrites on it. And I believe it was a relative of Mo Howard from the Three Stooges. I believe he has a grandson who is a writer, and he basically took the script and whipped it up a little bit and souped it up, and made it a little bit funnier, a little bit zanier. And so that one was Surfs Up, I believe, is the episode. But basically, the you got a new opening, and one of the characters is a crab character, and he walks out onto the beach, and he pulls out a inflatable raft, and he starts blowing it up. And by the time he finishes blowing it up, it's revealed to be basically a cow. And whenever I got to animate that scene, I thought it was quite comical, and so I felt like we are actually starting to generate stuff that was, could actually make people laugh. So that was new, and that was fun.
Nice. Well, I have 3 coloring pages of Beach Bums Island,
Oh yeah.
and I was going to show them to you.
Okay.
Sorry. They're all hid away somewhere.
That's okay. Maybe if we do another episode.
We don't have time to do another episode. Hmm. Huh. Do you go to Beach Bums Island?
I did go when it was open. It wasn't open very long. It didn't quite catch on, and so I think it was only open for maybe less than a year. But I did go a couple of times um, when it was open. It was just it was a little bit of a drive, you know. It's probably a 30-minute drive to get there, you know, but at the same time it was cool to bring my friends and say, hey, look what I, you know, helped make and, you know, eat some pizza. So, yeah, we did go there a couple or a few times.
You have some photos of when you went to Beach Bums Island.
I don't know that we did take any pictures, and if anybody did, I don't know who did. Uh, you know, I wonder if there might be any floating around online by any chance, but uh, that's probably something to check out later. I imagine you may have done some research in that regard, but um, the person that sponsored or the client that we did it for, I'm sure would still have. I'm pretty sure would still have some of that stuff. But yeah, it's kind of going into obscurity there. It's not a simple web search for by any means. Yeah, have not. I don't think it's anywhere readily available online, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't see anything online readily online. It was probably just under 20 years ago that they were trying to that that the restaurant opened, and it didn't last very long.
Well, I'll go see if I can find some of the pages again.
What's that?
Well, I was gonna find some free coloring pages again.
Oh, you're gonna go look for this? You said that we didn't have time for another episode. Did you mean like not today or just not at all?
Not at all.
Oh, some big event gonna happen?
It is going to happen.
What is this big what big event?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Huh. You worked on several commercials, like McDonald's and Target.
Uh I did a shot for a McDonald's commercial. It was basically a drink, a plastic cup, and it had some water drops on it. And the camera just it kind of spun, and the camera, was very low and looking up at it, and made it look ginormous. I don't know if I remember. I don't think I worked on any commercials for Target. uh, uh, the main claim to fame commercial wise that I worked on was there's a grocery store chain here in Kansas City called Price Chopper, and they had a couple of mascots. They called them Price Chompers. They're basically furry little fuzzy little characters. They have great big old teeth, and the idea was that they would chomp on the price. They would chomp on the prices, and you know, uh, they were nothing but mouth, basically. I mean, they were maybe, they're supposed to be about, a little bit smaller than a basketball, but they were just like basically spheres with eyes and great big old teeth, and they're like a lot of hair covered in hair, and one was red and one's blue, and they would run around the store and basically chomp prices. So we got to develop those characters. Well, we took the characters designs that the client sent to us, and I got to kind of model them and make them in 3D and uh, make the character rig for them and animate them. And we did some test footage and showed it to the client and kept what worked and threw out what didn't, and ended up making probably, I don't know, roughly, well, we did short little eh, little animations that would go on the beginning and the end of 30-second commercials. And then we did some other commercials that were completely animated, from beginning to end. Um, so, we probably did a couple of dozen different uh, 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 pieces that they used, or entire commercial spots. Um, and a lot of the animations that I got to work on for that are on my website as well. Uh, got to do a lot of character animation with those characters, and that was fun too.
All right. I noticed there's a picture behind you.
Oh yeah, which picture? This.
Yes.
That's a Christmas card. There's Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus on there.
Hmm.
You getting ready for Christmas?
Yes.
Should be fun.
Yes. Well, Thanks so much, Brian. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, you're welcome. I thank you for having me on, and if anyone watching the video wants to check out some of this stuff that I've animated and that we talked about on this episode, my website is linusanimation.com.
All right. Stay tuned. There'll be more guests coming up. So, Merry Christmas, everyone. Until next time, peace.
Bye.